All right. Okay, we're going to get started. If we could all stand and let's do the Shema together. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto, Leolam Vayeh. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be his glorious name, whose kingdom is forever and ever. Amen. Amen. Okay, we're going to go right into the blessing over the reading of the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bakar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who chose us from all the peoples and gave to us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. Today's Torah portion starts in 47:28. And that's what I'm going to read. I'm going to read right there to the end of that chapter. And it says, now Israel lived in the land of Egypt, in Goshen, and they acquired property in it and were fruitful and became very numerous. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time of Israel to die drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, please, if I have found favor in your sight, place now your hand under my thigh and deal with me in kindness and faithfulness. Please do not bury me in Egypt. But when I lie down with my fathers, you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, Joseph, I will do as you have said. And he said, swear to me. So he swore to him. Then Israel bowed in worship at the head of his bed. Now let's do the blessing after from the reading of the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah timet, v'chayei olam, nato botekanu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah. Amen. You can be seated. If you're joining us on Zoom and you're at home, you can get up and have yourself a cup of coffee now. And so, all right, everyone. We have now come to the end of Bereshit, Genesis. The Torah portion is called Vayechi, which means, and he lived. The Torah portion begins, and Jacob lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. All right. And as I said, this Torah portion is going to go from 47:28 to the end of Genesis, which is chapter 50, verse 26. But let's go back a little. Okay, in chapter 47, when Joseph heard of the arrival of his family, early on it says he hurried to meet them. He then introduced 5 of his brothers to Pharaoh, who questioned them about their purpose in coming and their needs during their stay. They told Pharaoh that they were shepherds and requested to dwell in a, well, they they requested to dwell in an area because they were shepherds. And Pharaoh is the one who gave them the land of Goshen. Okay, so as to tend to their flocks, Pharaoh grants this request, and then he tells them, can you take, for them to take care of his cattle too, which they do as well. Joseph then brought his father to meet Pharaoh. He needs to personally inform Pharaoh that they have arrived. So because Pharaoh is the one who had originally extended the invitation to them, upon meeting the king, Jacob gave Pharaoh a blessing. Pharaoh questioned him about his age, to which Jacob responded that he was 130 years old. Imagine meeting a person 130 years old. He probably looked at him and said oh my gosh, I didn't know people can live that long, But upon meeting the king, Pharaoh, after meeting them and blessing Pharaoh for the final time, Jacob returned to his family in Goshen, where Joseph provided them with enough food to live. So during the years that Jacob and his family lived in Goshen, the 7-year famine was still upon Egypt. Okay, the people of Egypt, they've exhausted their financial reserves in purchasing grain, and many began to suffer greatly. The people of Egypt and Canaan came to Joseph and asked for food. Joseph offered to give them bread and grain in exchange for their livestock. The Egyptians agreed, and Joseph greatly increased the Pharaoh's flocks and his herds. And what he did with that, Pharaoh is becoming more and more wealthy. This is why we have to look at Egypt at that time being the most wealthiest empire of that time, and their land mass was huge too. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I'm giving you a recap because we weren't here last week, so we're covering a little bit of the previous portion. Again, the following year, the people went to Joseph as the famine continued, having already sold all their livestock the year before and now still having no money. They asked Joseph to purchase their lands and allow the people to live as slaves to Pharaoh as payment. So Joseph agreed to their request, and the people's lands, crops, and life became the property of Pharaoh. Joseph provided the people with food and seed for planting. He decreed that since they now belonged to Pharaoh, they would give 1/5 of every harvest to the king, because they were grateful to Joseph for saving their lives. They agreed. Okay, however, none of the land owned by the Egyptian priests were taken from them. Pharaoh had said that the priests were not subject to this tax, and that he will provide for their needs. I don't know if it's true. I tried looking it up. Maybe somebody, but this was implemented by Joseph. 1/5 is going to go to the government. I read one of the scholars was saying that is still in effect today. That 1/5 goes to the Egyptian government. So, and may very well be. But then as for the Israelites, they prospered and multiplied in the area of Goshen. And we, previous times that we have studied this, we have seen that they became very numerous, and they had no needs in Goshen. They were able to provide for themselves. Let's talk a little bit about Goshen. Goshen was a place of lush field for their herds. It was also a place where the families of Jacob could grow, prosper, and eventually leave with the wealth that would help them build their nation. think about this. Just as Abraham and Sarah were exiled to Egypt during their own times of famine, and they left Egypt with what? With wealth. Pharaoh gave them much, and it's like basically he gave it to them to say, here, take all of this, now get out of here, leave. But they too left with wealth. So too would the entire nation return to Canaan with Egypt's riches. So it's going to happen again. But the Midrash tells us that the area was sanctified. This area of Goshen was sanctified since the time of Sarah. Since Sarah spent time there, Goshen served as a sanctuary while they were there. In Egypt, they are surrounded by their idols. In Goshen, they had no such idols there. They were protected by God. I never thought of it that way. Here they are in a foreign land, and this foreign land is surrounded by idols, but the area that they live, they had nothing of the sort. And to me, that reminds us about even today in this world and society that we live in, all the idols that are surrounding us, and we have our own sanctuary at home. We have one right here in the congregation, but we're protected. We don't have those idols, and that also reminded me about our when we want to become a member of this congregation, everything that we are told and we have to sign off on it and everything. And a lot of it is because there's people out there that have their idols, their own ideas and everything. And if they can't bring it into this congregation, we're separate. It's just like if a gay person came in and wanted to push their agenda and want us pastors to marry them. No, we are not going to do that. So what were you going to say, Tila?
I wanted the last Torah study. You said that they all left Egypt, and then
Yep.
Okay, but then why would they leave Goshen when it was so rich and fertile? And they had it good there. Why would they leave then from there? I'm just curious, because I don't think they all left, but I know you said that the word, where it says it all left.
And that's going to be like a couple more Torah portions. Next week we get to Shemot, okay, and then there's the next Torah portion after that. I think that's when they're going to leave Egypt, and that's where I'll point out to you where it says A-L-L, all. Doesn't say majority of them, but there's different understanding. It's just like even today, I found something that I thought was remarkable, and I've taught this Torah portion before. In fact, I may have taught it last year, where I said, talk about, we're going to get into the word, and it talks about beyond the Jordan, beyond the Yarden, and I'm thinking, boy, they left and they went all the way across the Yarden. And then I found out something else. I thought, oh my gosh, no, this makes more sense. But you can go, it's just like the amount of years they spent in Egypt. Like I said, the next portion I'll cover how many years I believe they are there, but there's numerous numbers that people come up with how long they were in Egypt. So, but we'll, that like I said, there's some interesting points here. So in chapter 47, 27, did you notice in chapter 47, 27 and 28 are very similar. In 27, it says Israel. Then in 28, it says Jacob. So it tells us that at this point, the Hebrew people had been in Egypt for 17 years when it says Israel. Okay. And then we can see in verse 28, it's all about Jacob himself, speaking on the years that he had been in Egypt. And we see that as far as his health goes, he is not doing well. So that's what we see here. In 27, Israel is talking about the people, the nation. And then in 28, it's talking about Jacob himself. So the Torah portion focuses on the final years of Jacob's life in Egypt. You know, what a joy it had to have been that Jacob is reunited with his beloved son Joseph. And of the 147 years of Jacob's life, the Midrash says that the 17 years in Egypt were, in Jacob's words, the best years of his life. So he had to leave Canaan in order to enjoy the best years of his life, you know. And then you wonder later on when he says, I don't want to be buried here, you know, I want to be taken back to my land, to be buried with my father, my grandfather, my wife, and, you know, but we'll get to that. Pastor Bruce.
We talked a couple weeks ago about the idea that we see Israel and Jacob, like we just pointed out. Israel is referring to Israel in the spirit. And here we see in 27 in the spirit, they're living in the best of the land. In Goshen, they become very numerous and fruitful, they acquire property. So when we're walking in the spirit, we acquire the blessings of God. And so this is why it says now Israel lived in the land of Egypt. Then when we get down to 28, Jacob, of course, Jacob is Israel. But Jacob is, whenever you see the name Jacob in the word, it's referring to his individual natural life.
Right.
Or in the flesh. And that could, and when I say in the flesh, that's not necessarily negative. So Jacob, he lives in the flesh in the natural 17 years, but Israel, because he's in Egypt there in Goshen, he's prospering.
Yeah. And you know, like what we said earlier, they're being taken care of. The Lord is taking care of his people. I don't think it's any different today. I mean, we're being taken care of. I think even yesterday's Shabbat service, you know, Bruce and Kathleen said a lot of stuff out there, but they specified how the Lord is taking care of his people.
Yes.
You know, and, you know, but it's all because we need to be obedient. You know, if you're obedient, you know, he's going to take care of you. You know, well, in Roman numeral number 1, Vayechi means and he lived. So and he lived is your fill-in. And as I said earlier, in letter A, Jacob is now in Egypt with all his sons. All is your fill-in. And then in letter B, Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years. And the Midrash says this was Jacob's best years of his life. I don't know. It's like he can't get away. Well, maybe it's the best years of his life because he has all his sons there. All the family are there. But I remember thinking about it, the best years of his life, just because he found Joseph. I think that would make things wonderful. But it makes it seem like, you know, he still has this thing about Joseph, his favorite son, you know, but that may or may not be. But after Jacob's death, we will have come to the end of an era of the patriarchs. Okay, here in chapter 47, from Jacob's deathbed, he blesses his sons. Okay, so in the Bible, we have the recordings of all the deaths of all of the patriarchs. And then on a side note, we also have some information about Sarah, okay, matriarch. We have Rebecca and Rachel's death, we have some information. But have you noticed there is nothing in the Torah that says anything about Leah's death? You know, her death, I don't know, maybe it just wasn't news for that time, but but the only clue is in Genesis 49, verse 31, where Jacob, before he dies, said that there they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah. There they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah, and there I buried Leah. Okay, that's all we get. But it's amazing, you know. Rachel, he buried where in Bethlehem, but then Leah, he buries Leah with all the patriarchs and matriarchs. So, what it seems to me, at the end of Jacob's life, he requested to be buried beside Leah, suggesting that he'd come to recognize the virtue in Leah and had grown to love her as deeply as he loved Rachel. The great honor Leah received in death, the Midrash said that Rachel was 36 years old when she died. And I don't know if you looked this up, but Leah, it says, was 45. So Leah died 9 years later. Leah was a loving and faithful wife, even though her husband Jacob favored Rachel. Leah remained committed, enduring this unfairness through all this because of her faith in God. Okay, so Leah, and when I say that because I'm going to cover something in a little bit too about Leah and Jacob, because Leah's story in the Bible is so intertwined with that of her sister Rachel and their husband Jacob. Like I said, Leah, we have seen it all through these Torah portions. She always seemed to go unnoticed, living in the shadows. Her story illustrates that God often chooses to fulfill his plans and purposes by using those who are overlooked by others. And like I said, I'm going to give you a little idea about Reuben too, Reuben's sin. And it's just going to make you think, well, maybe it happened differently. But go ahead, Tila.
You know, when you look at Leah and Rachel, Leah seemed to be so spiritual, where Rachel, you know, she took the idols, you know, so she was in the flesh.
Yes.
You know, she's in the flesh. And so, you know, isn't it true in our own walk, as we get closer to the Father, that we look to those things that are spiritual because we're drawn into his love rather than the sexual content of the world?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I saw the difference between the two of them. You guys brought that up?
No, it is. It's interesting, but the Siddur Olam Rabbah says that Leah passed away in the year 2216 after creation. It goes a little bit further with it. 9 years after Rachel, in the same year that the brothers sold Joseph to the traders going to Egypt. Rachel died when she was 36, so Leah died when she was 45. This is what it said. So Jacob knows he is about to die. Before he dies, he has some unfinished business to take care of. The first thing he asked to Joseph, who Jacob knew had all the power and authority to allow for this request. In verse 29 to 31, it says, "Please do not bury me in Egypt. But when I lie down with my father, you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place." And he says, like I said, Joseph says, "I will do as you have said." And then Jacob says, "Swear to me." So he swore to him. Then Israel bowed in worship at the head of the bed. Joseph promises his father that when he dies, Jacob, his dad, will not be buried in Egypt. And if there's anyone that could grant this request, it would be Joseph. Obviously Joseph would have to ask Pharaoh, but he has found favor through all these years because of interpreting the dreams and everything. Jacob just knew that this wasn't that Joseph can do it, something that he can do, and he wanted it done. So in verse 29, it also says, I am about to be gathered to my people. Jacob doesn't say in a short time I'll be dead. He says, Jacob believes that there is life after death. The Torah does not say much about life after death, and we know in the time of Yeshua, there were two sects of Judaism who had different views of life after death. The Sadducees did not believe in life after death. They didn't believe no heaven, no hell, no resurrection of the dead. The Pharisees, on the other hand, they did believe in life after death. They believed in the resurrection of the dead. You remember reading when it said when the Sadducees asked Yeshua to prove from Torah, okay, the resurrection. Yeshua spoke about Abraham. Right away, he went to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I'll get to you right now, Sharon. He said in Mark 12, 26, 27, but regarding the fact that the dead rise, have you not read the book of Moses? In the passage about the burning bush, how God spoke to him saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. So Yeshua was quoting Torah to prove that there is life after death. Part of life is preparing for death. Well, here, I'll get to this. Go ahead, Sharon.
No, this is just a funny remark. It seems that John Lennon was a follower of the Sadducees.
Oh,
No
yeah.
heaven, no hell.
Oh, yeah. That's a good song.
Yeah.
Imagine.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that might be the Sadducees' national anthem, right?
It was very sad, you see.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon.
Still Sadducees or?
The sect of the Sadducees, it went away after the destruction of the temple. The Pharisees continue to this day through the rabbis. But the Sadducees, it seems like it just dissolved and went away, and we didn't hear about them. But there's little snippets of things coming back. And I really believe that one of them is the understanding of when, not Sukkot, but what's Shavuot. And I believe that Shavuot, when Shavuot arrives, the Sadducees, their understanding is you count at the Shabbat. You wait until the weekly Shabbat, and then you start counting. Well, if he was crucified and died at Passover, and that was like 6 days before, you would have to wait 6 days and then start counting the 50. I don't believe that was the case. I believe that the word tells us that you count the day after the Passover, you start to count, and that's the way we do it. That's the way Israel does it today. But there are some areas of Israel that they count according to the way of the Sadducees. I just don't. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I don't follow that route. I don't know if anybody else does, but one reason is just like me, the Book of Mormons or something like that. If they came out and said, well, this is the way it is or something like that, I wouldn't put anything on that because we got enough in the Bible that tells us exactly what the Lord wants us to do or what, but as far as the Sadducees, are they still around today? I gotta say, maybe they are.
Don't call themselves.
They don't call themselves Sadducee. Sharon, go ahead and share. We can't hear you. You're muted. Okay,
There. Can you hear me now?
now we can.
Okay. I'm one of the few that kind of believe, because the scripture says it's the day after the Shabbat, not the day after Passover. So there is room for multiple interpretations of that.
But remember, the day after Passover is a Shabbat. Okay, that is a Shabbat. So that's why I believe that right away you start counting. But go ahead, Sharon.
Well, yeah, Passover itself is a Shabbat. I mean,
No, not Passover, but the
Sabbath?
day after. Yeah, the first day of unleavened bread is a Shabbat.
Yeah.
That's the day after Passover.
But when God gives all the Moedim, isn't Passover one of them? I believe it's a Sabbath.
No, I don't. No, it's not a Sabbath. Yeah. Were you going to say something, Pastor Bruce?
Well, what I was going to say was there is the whole idea of no life after death is coming back amongst the Jews. There are large segments of Jews that don't believe in resurrection today. So the Jewish community is kind of split on that. So, and of course, that's probably predominant because so many Jews are just secular these days.
Right.
So, but, and then as far as the Passover itself, remember, is only a couple hours long. It's from between the evening to dark. So it's only 3 or 4 hours in length, the Passover itself. Then you go into the first day of unleavened bread, which is a Shabbat. You know, I personally believe the year that all this came down, that it was the weekly Shabbat. Pastor Vince and I disagree on that.
Yeah.
But we've decided to go with the way we do
We
it.
still like each other.
We still like each other.
We still love each other.
Let's think about the Messianic as opposed to the Christian. Well, you know, you can disagree and still fellowship together. You know, so, but and it's not that big a deal. So we go with, so we're in unity with the rest of the Jewish community and the Messianic community.
Yeah.
Because there's different ways, you know, which Shabbat are you talking about? The weekly Shabbat or the Shabbat of the Sabbaton, which is the first day of unleavened bread.
Right.
You know, they've argued it for 2,000 years. We're not going to get it in the next week.
You know, and I'll tell you something, you know, being a pastor, people aren't going to agree with everything you have to say. And I like Pastor Bruce, I think he said it real well, because even, you know, one thing about in Israel, when the Jews midrash like this, after, even if they don't agree with many things, they don't walk away saying, well, you're not even a Jew. You know, they don't do that. But, you know, but we see that in Christianity, you know, where you're not even a Christian, you know. We can disagree, you know, even at sometimes I'm pulled aside after service and people come up and talk to me about things and they, well, I didn't agree with that. I said, well, it's okay. It's okay. You know, study the word. Maria, she's not here today. Maria and I, there's something.
2 weeks ago, talk about how long they were in Egypt.
I know it. she'll, yeah, she won't miss that one. But there's things that her and I disagree on, you know, but, you know, she's still my sister. I'm still her brother, you know, but, you know, there's, you know, so what you do is you search the word, you know, and that's what I even did today, because like I said, there was something that I taught on before that I don't think I taught right. I think there's a different, well, I should say there's a different understanding, because there's rabbis that believe that they went all the way to the Jordan River on their trek to bury Jacob, you know, And then there's others that know. And I brought in a map today behind me, and we'll get to it later to show you why I thought, oh my gosh, I think I stand corrected. So, but part of life is preparing for death. Having a relationship with God is preparation for your life after death. Jacob is dying. The rabbis tell us that this is the first time in the Torah that a person is being sick is mentioned. I'm thinking about it, because we've covered a few, and I thought, oh my gosh, maybe he's right. I don't recall reading something where a person was sick. But they said this is the first time a person being sick is mentioned. We learn a good lesson here. To get our affairs in order before you go to be with the Lord. I can only imagine how it would have gone had Jacob not have his sons come in for a blessing. And then talking about the blessing, the first to receive a blessing was who? Joseph. So Joseph was actually number 11 in the birth order. Jacob too was not a firstborn, yet received the firstborn blessing. The firstborn would have received a double portion. So to bless Joseph as a firstborn, Jacob adopted Joseph's two sons, thus making Ephraim and Manasseh his sons. In fact, that's what it said. These are now my sons. Okay. I don't know about you, but all of you that have children, I mean, when you start having grandchildren, I know that they're my kids, or they're, but I tell them, no, they're my babies. In fact, sometimes I tease and I tell Peggy, I said, when they're brats, they belong to you. But when they're angels, they're mine. So, but when you start, and the other thing, I'll just throw a plug in there for any of you that are thinking of teaching and helping out Sue Contreras with all this. That's the other thing. When you start teaching the children, you're going to find out that these children are yours. When I take the kids in and everything, there's a dear term in Spanish that we say mija and mijo. Yeah. And I call them that when I'm in class, because to me they are, and I don't ever get any of them that say something like, I'm not your mijo or something. No, because they love it. They just, they get love at home. They're going to get love at church, So what's that? We're all family. Yes, we are. They were now placed, Ephraim and Manasseh, his son. Now they were now placed ahead of Reuben and the others. In 1 Chronicles 5:1, it says, now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright given to the sons of Joseph, the sons of Israel. You may not agree with this, but we learned from this that we can change the firstborn status if your children are undeserving, not walking with the Lord, not honoring their parents. So also, when Jacob blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, Ephraim was the first, even though Manasseh was the oldest. But just a little bit of background on Reuben, and this is what I wanted to get to. And we have all read how Reuben defiled his father's bed, right? Okay. And we have come away with that Reuben had relations with his father's concubine. This is a type of understanding that is out there, and majority of your scholars believe that that's exactly what happened. Okay, but the Talmud addresses this in Shabbat 55b. it comes away with something totally different. According to this passage, Reuben acted in an inappropriate manner, but he was not guilty of the sin or the crime of sleeping with his father's concubine, merely involving himself unjustifiably in his father's personal affairs, which is considered actually to violate. Okay, now here's I'll go deeper into it. His motivation, as understood by Rav Shimon, was his mother's honor. And I'm talking about Reuben's mother. Reuben's mother was Leah. Okay. Now Rachel died. Okay. 9 years later, Leah dies. So think about it like this. It was one thing for his mother to have been displaced by Rachel. Okay. But quite a different matter to be displaced by a concubine, by a servant. Deep inside, everyone, including Leah and her son Reuben, knew that Jacob loved Rachel more than anyone else. But once Rachel had died, Jacob should assume his rightful place in the tent of Leah, which it says he did. For some reason, Jacob disagreed, and Rachel's demise, after Rachel's death, he moved his bed to the tent of Bilhah. Okay, Reuben went ballistic, and he set out to make a wrong right. And this internal business that he did, it says matters in the Shabbat 55b, it says matters of the bedroom, which was not his business. But there's one version of this that says Reuben actually entered his father's tent and he flipped the bed that Bilhah was on. With her on it, he flipped it. The Targum states, as per the Talmud, that Reuben had moved his father's bed. Rabbi Samuel ben Nachman said in Rabbi Jonathan's name, whoever says that Reuben sinned is merely making an error. Yes, Reuben was guilty of a sin, but not the sin of sleeping with his father's concubine. So I thought, oh my gosh, that there's something there that makes you think about it. Because then it would be, I'll finish this. Yes, I know it says in Genesis 35:22, Reuben went and slept with his father's concubine, Bilhah, and Israel heard about it. But right after that it says, now there were 12 sons of Jacob. The Talmud and the Midrash agree to tell us if Reuben actually laid with his father's concubine, Jacob would have removed him from the family completely. That is why these rabbis say it never happened. So something to think about. Pastor Bruce.
Well, I was just wondering what they were basing that on, but it's your last statement there could be what they are basing it all on.
Well, and I thought about that when I went back, when I read this, and I thought, you're right. Well, right after that, it says, now they were the 12 sons of Jacob. Reuben is still considered, in fact, he's one of the tribes. So that's what they're basing it on, is the fact that if this would have actually happened the way that a lot of the scholars believe it did, Reuben would have been removed as one of his sons. Okay, let me see. Stefan or Sylvia, go ahead. Unmute.
Good morning.
Good morning. We missed you yesterday.
We miss you too.
No, they're up in Big Bear, right? You're up in Big Bear, correct?
I'm away right now. The family is in Big Bear.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stefan.
Um, so talking about the tribes, so the 10 sons of Jacob, so he brings in the 2 sons of Joseph, and that makes the 12 tribes, correct?
That's correct.
Now, there's certain passages that talks about 10 tribes. Is there a difference, or who's out of the picture?
I didn't read anything about the 10 tribes. There's always 12, but remember, Levi
Yes,
didn't get an inheritance of the land.
correct.
Joseph did not get an inheritance, but Ephraim and Manasseh did. They replaced the two. So maybe when you say the 10 sons, they're talking about
After the rebellion.
maybe after the rebellion. And
I don't have quite, I just remember reading 10 somewhere. Now, the Levites are not part of these tribes.
well, they didn't receive an inheritance. You're right. They didn't receive an inheritance of the land. They were
Right,
given cities within the land to dwell amongst all the tribes.
right. Okay. I'll have to look it up a little better.
Okay. All right. Here, Pastor Bruce wanted to jump on that.
The study of the tribes is extremely difficult.
Difficult, yeah.
Because there's mention of 12, there's mention of 10. When they give the names, there's different names in them, and some of the listings, for instance, Dan's removed
Revelation.
completely. So it's very confusing about the tribes, and this is where two house theology is birthed out of this, and different things. We just have to come to the conclusion, I think, that there's a different emphasis put on
Right.
each thing that we read. It has a different emphasis to it,
Right.
and it's incumbent upon us to find what that is, so that we can understand why the difference, because there's huge differences in the lists, and it's problematic. There's no doubt about it.
Go ahead, Tila.
No, I was just gonna mention Dan, because in Revelation, Dan's not listed, and so I had a discussion with a pastor one time, and he was trying to quiz me. And so he said, well, give me a question that I can't answer. And I said, okay. I said, which tribe wasn't mentioned in Revelation? And he didn't know. I just thought it was,
Well, the thing about Dan too, she touched on Dan. Originally Dan's inheritance was down south near Gaza.
Yeah.
They didn't like where they were at, so they moved themselves. But that, like Pastor Bruce says, when you study the tribes, it's difficult, and I'm going to give you something else I'll cover on in a bit. But in Roman numeral 2, Israel, Jacob's last days. In Roman numeral 2, we're going to cover Israel's last days. And as I said earlier, in letter A, Jacob does not want to be buried in Egypt. So buried is your fill-in. And we're getting to right now in letter B, Ephraim and Manasseh are blessed by their grandfather. Okay, so back to Joseph and his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Rebekah received a prophecy that Jacob would be greater than Esau. Okay, so too Jacob knew that the tribe of Ephraim would be greater than the tribe of Manasseh. Every week at Shabbat, we bless our children. May God bless you like Ephraim and Manasseh. We've added in both Joshua and Caleb. Okay, and I think that is very appropriate when we bless our children. But if you're looking at it, because they are 2 others great, 2 other greats of our faith. they are, they should be at it. And people look and say, both a Jew and a Gentile. But do you realize when we bless them to be like Ephraim, Manasseh, Yehoshua, Joshua, and Caleb, it's not, 3 Jews and 1 Gentile. It's actually 3 Gentiles and 1 Jew, because Ephraim and Manasseh were born in Egypt, but the rabbis have their understanding of this.
Yes. They can't live with it.
They cannot live with that. All of them were Jews. They all became Jewish, and Ephraim and Manasseh, they had a Jewish mother. Remember we covered it, Dinah's when she had the baby. So they get around it like that. But when you look at it, Ephraim and Manasseh were from Egypt, okay? And Caleb, he was a Gentile. So really, like I said, it's 3 Gentiles and 1 Jew, But isn't it wonderful how the Lord brings everything together?
Amen.
Amen. Why do we bless our sons like this? We are told that Ephraim and Manasseh were the first to be raised in exile in a foreign culture, but they maintained their faith and their practices of Judaism. If you are, they were Hebrews. Okay. So when we pray for our sons, we pray with the hope that our sons will not assimilate into the world, but hold on to the Lord. And that, and that's why it's so important that the parents or grandparents come up and lay their hands on their children, and if you're at home and you have your children there with you, lay your hands on them and pray for them, because these are the things that they are going to remember. When we learned the Shema and we taught it, I don't know if some of you have been here a while, because my little Aiden is how old now, honey? 16. He just turned 16 a few days ago. Yeah, 16. But I used to bring him in, hold him in my arms, and we would sing the Shema and everything. And then when I would sing the Shema, I could hear him singing it. So just as a young child, they learned this. What were you going to say, Tila?
Well, I liked it in verse 19 of 48, because it says, and his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become, in my translation says, a multitude of nations.
Multitude of nations.
And I think past Torah studies or something, because I made a notation that this was the grafted in. This is the one new man, a multitude of nations. It doesn't just say Israel, it says a multitude.
Yep.
Nation of nations.
So, but Manasseh is the oldest. Ephraim gets the firstborn blessing. Who has the biggest land mass or biggest territory in all of Israel? Manasseh. So that's why there's a lot who believe that when we go to be with the Lord in the millennial days, or that's where we're going to be. We're going to be with the tribe of Manasseh. I don't know if they're using the largest landmass as the reason. That's probably it. But I've always said I'd love to belong to the tribe of Benjamin, and the reason is because of that's where Jerusalem is in his territory. But then I've always said, now you watch, that's what I want. But then the Lord's going to say, no, you go all the way up there. You're with the tribe of Dan. But I'll be okay. I'll be okay.
We'll be there. That's what's important.
Well, and I don't know about you, but I for myself, I don't ever remember my parents they never prayed over me when I was a little boy. Did I walk in the world? Absolutely. So, it's just wonderful. I just wanted to say that when you have children or or if you have children, pray for them. And even if they're not even around, Peggy and I know at night in bed, we'll pray for our children. You know, we continue to pray, you know, and there's a lot of them. So a lot of children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. And we were just told that we got number 10 due in May, great grandchild. Israel.
Oh.
Come on, Peggy.
There's so many.
That's Vince's line.
So it's great. And did you notice even on his deathbed, Jacob's favorite is still Joseph. In 48:1, we read that we're reading how Jacob is sick. But in Genesis 48:5-6, Jacob tells Joseph that his 2 sons are now his, just like Reuben and Simeon are his. Notice that the 2 oldest sons from Leah are Reuben and Simeon. So now Ephraim and Manasseh will be treated as the 2 receiving the first blessings. Jacob, but then Jacob asks, who are these? And Joseph says to his father, these are my sons. Now we get to the blessings of Ephraim and Manasseh. And Rashi comments on Jacob's adopting Ephraim and Manasseh in Genesis 48:5. It refers to the share in the land of Israel that each one will receive. They are similar to the shares that Jacob, the other sons, will inherit. In fact, this adoption is the reason that Ephraim and Manasseh are counted among the 12 tribes of Israel. But there are 2 sons who will not receive an inheritance. And Joseph will not, and Levi will not. Although Joseph wants his father to bless his children, it's unlikely he has any idea that his father would also give them equal status with his own sons. I'm thinking when all this was going on, it was probably a surprise to as well as a blessing to Joseph. Now, here's the other thing. The rabbis say it is the only scene of a grandfather and grandchildren together blessing in Torah. So go ahead.
I noticed in there where it said that when he asked, who are these? He was blind. How did he see them?
You know what? And I wonder, like you said, he was blind, but how blind was he? You're right. Who are these? So maybe he felt them and then he said, who are these? That probably had to be it. But you're right, Melinda. It's like, I always thought with him, he was probably maybe not completely blind, but he was blind enough where you just can't. Like me, if I take off my glasses and no, I'm telling you, even right here, I could see where it says family room closed during Shabbat. If I take off I can't see the letters. I need my glasses. So I'm not blind, but but I can't see without them.
He knew enough in the spirit because of the fact that he saw them, but instead of this, he did this.
Right.
Instead of to right, he went to this. You know what I'm saying? So he obviously there was, God was doing something with them.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It didn't matter what he saw, but in the spirit, I think he just knew that instead of this, he had to cross over.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's another thing. He crossed over.
Yeah.
It's just something.
But then it's also he's a grandfather. And I'm telling you, when you have your grandchildren there, oh my gosh, they do no wrong.
Absolutely.
They are the greatest. They are the greatest. Taryn.
Also thinking, he could have been blind and, however blind he was, but he could still hear, I mean, when a couple people are walking up, you hear more than just one set of footsteps. So he's like, okay, well, who are these? Like, I hear multiple footsteps. So, I mean, your other senses get heightened.
No, and you're right.
Yeah.
And the thing is too, how many of you, if the lights went off in here and Pastor Bruce started talking, you know it's Pastor Bruce.
Yeah.
You don't have to see him, you know it's him. With Tony, Stephanie's mom, you know, she was losing her eyesight at the very end, you know, but she would come walking in and we would say hi to her and everything, and she would always, you know, hi Miha, how are you doing? And you know, she knew exactly who we were. I had the same thing with Mary, Kathy Reed's mama. You know, I'm not saying she was going blind, she wasn't, but the same thing, you know, I would be behind her somewhere and I'd start talking and she wouldn't even look at me. And she'd say, Vince, come here, you know, and I'd walk over to her because she just heard my voice. So we know, I would think any of you, if you were talking in here and the lights were out, I'd know exactly who was speaking. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
I was just thinking, because you brought up a point that this is the first time we read about sicknesses with Jacob. Very interesting. I never caught that before.
Yes.
But you know, the word for sick is the word challah.
Oh.
And remember, I did a teaching on that
Yeah.
a long time ago. Challah is the bread of sickness. And the reason it's called the bread of sickness is what we're told in Corinthians. If you take that to the table incorrectly without discerning properly the body of Messiah, you can become sick and die.
Is that the same challah that
Same challah,
that,
same word.
the Islam that they use with their
No, that's halal.
Hallel.
halal? Okay.
Yeah, don't get that confused. But that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And if you tie that in, I wonder what that might mean. That'd be an interesting study to see how that first mention of sickness is tied in with that halal.
Right. There was a lot of interesting things. I think when you go over the Torah portions year after year after year, every time we do it, you know, something just jumps out, something different. And what it does is, you know, like Pastor Bruce said, we know a lot of the people in here that dig in. I thought with what Melinda and Roseanne did with the letters.
That was tremendous.
Yeah, that was very good because I could see how meticulous you were into looking in and finding out. And I think all of us need to be like that. We need to get in there. And sometimes I'll do like an overview or something like that. But then when I do the Torah studies, I know I just can't do the overview. I got to get in there and try to find some nuggets in there. And if you're looking for nuggets, you're going to find them. You're going to find them. So Joseph noticed that his father had placed his right hand. This is what Tila was talking about earlier. He noticed that he placed his right hand on Ephraim, who was the youngest. And he tried to correct his father, Jacob, because he had put his left hand on Manasseh. However, Jacob refused and told him that he knew that he had placed his right hand on the youngest. It's like, I know, my son, I know. You know, Jacob told them that although Manasseh's line would multiply and become great, Ephraim's generation would become a greater multitude of nations. Jacob blessed them all and told them that although he was dying, God would be with them and would take them back to Canaan. So here's a prophecy there, you know. So Ephraim may become a greater and represent a multitude of nations. But like I said, but it was Manasseh who had the much larger piece of land in Canaan. His territory, I don't know if you had a map of it. Yeah, look at that. Look at Manasseh's map. The map all the way from the Mediterranean Sea across the Jordan. You know, so it would stretch. It was the biggest by far, Pastor Bruce.
And what's interesting too, although Manasseh had the larger land grant, Ephraim, their land grant is just above Jerusalem.
Right.
And they're they're talking about a greater multitude of nations even. And it's interesting because if you take that, and because a lot of people think that the Christians are Ephraim. And I don't really hold to that, but there's some interesting points to it. And one of the interesting points is the word Christian in Hebrew is notzrim, which means watchman. So the watchmen are watching over Jerusalem. And of course, we're told to pray for the peace of Jerusalem perpetually. So, and it's of course the Christian church that is watching over the Jews to this very day. So it becomes very interesting how
it is very interesting.
you
You're
know,
right.
I'm not sure what to make of all that, but it fodder for a lot of good study, that's for sure.
Right. Amen. Amen. In letter C, Roman numeral 2, letter C, Manasseh is the older. So older is your fill-in. But Ephraim receives the first blessing. Letter D, Reuben, I put in parentheses, the oldest, does not receive the firstborn blessing. And then in letter E, Ephraim and Manasseh replace Joseph and Levi among the 12 tribes of Israel. So replace and 12 are your fill-ins. Okay, we're not going to cover every blessing of all his sons, but in Roman numeral 3, Jacob blesses the sons of Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. Blesses is your fill-in. So in Genesis 49, details the blessing and predictions that Jacob gives each of his sons. He tells them that they will become a great nation and that they will become the 12 tribes of Israel. His prophecies to his sons were not his own, but were shown to him by the Lord. So in letter A, they would all be part of a great nation. So Jacob's sons now are blessed in order, from the oldest to the youngest. Okay, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, it says he lost his inheritance because of the sin with his father's concubine. Okay, like I shared with you earlier, he could have gone in there and just, flipped her off the bed and thrown her to the ground or something like that because he was ticked off because his father was defiling this tent with the concubine. That may have happened, or he may have very in fact slept with his father's concubine. It's, whatever you want to believe, but what we do know is he did not receive the firstborn blessing. He did not get this double portion as is stated there. Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, just going back to letter E under Roman numeral 2, an interesting point. Ephraim and Manasseh replaced Joseph and Levi among the 12 tribes. If Ephraim and Manasseh are symbolic of Gentiles, which is a very strong possibility.
Right.
I just wonder if that replacement of the Aaronic priesthood with the Melchizedek is prophesied in that. Is the thought.
That's a good thought.
That's a thought. Wow.
Boy. Taryn, where's your mom or your grandma? She's got to do a study. She's got to do a study on this.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. When you said that, I got these little, what do they call those? The EBGBs?
Yeah. You bring out some good punch today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me see, where was I? Okay. So And letter B, they are blessed in order, oldest to youngest. And like I said, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, lost his inheritance. Okay. So one thing he says about him is he would be unstable as water and would not be successful. Both Levi and Simeon were hateful and unforgiving. Jacob sentenced them to be separated from each other in the promised land. For together in their anger, they had killed all the men in Shechem. Okay. And then to Judah, Jacob promised praise and dominion over the tribes of Israel. He compared him to a lion and foretold that the scepter would not reside in his tribe until the time of Shiloh. Judah would receive the most prominent blessings. Of all these blessings, Judah's main blessing was that God, hold on, Stephen. Jacob's main blessing was that God had designed that it would be from his tribe that the Messiah would come. And unto him shall the gathering. And what I found with the rabbis, the gathering, the obedience of the people will be. And that would include both Jews and Gentiles. So in due time, Yeshua was born from the tribe of Judah through the line of David, Judah's first king. Okay, let me get to Stephen. Stephen, go ahead, unmute.
So there's a movement that you probably heard of, the Greater Israel from
Yes.
the 70s, and their mapping seems to be like greater, I mean, if not greater, equal to the distribution of the 12 tribes. Is there a prophecy that backs this up? Do you know?
I don't think so. I think what their idea is their interpretation of what they're reading in Torah. Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, the Greater Israel comes out of British Israelism, which is part and parcel to replacement theology, which says that the Gentiles have become Israel,
right,
and the Jews are just kicked under the bus. So and then it leads from there into two-house theology and all sorts of things.
Right.
So Greater Israel is, in my opinion, is really heresy. So that's the roots of it. I'm not saying that it doesn't have some interesting points. Everything has interesting points, or you wouldn't buy into it.
Right.
So, but we always have to discern everything and tie it back into the word.
Right.
And anytime you come up with a thing where the Gentiles are replacing Israel, you're not in solid biblical understanding.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
It didn't quite fit my view of it, but I just wanted to.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
no, yeah. I mean, when you discern it like that, you're absolutely right. There's something there, and when that happens, you got to question it.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, Stephen. Go ahead, Tila.
Well, you know what, it says that Judah is a lion's whelp, and last night I looked it up and I didn't write it down, so I just put it here in my thing. But that whelp means strength and power, leadership and royalty, vigor and nobility,
Right.
growth and potential, and that's all what Yeshua, when you get into that tribe of Judah, all of these things come forth into Yeshua.
Right.
Nobility and so forth. And so I just, because it says whelp, not a lion. I mean,
Right.
even though we know he comes, but I don't know, it's just something
Well, and when you look at this, especially the tribe of Judah, earlier we did a parashah about Judah and Tamar, and when you see how dysfunctional the families in Torah are, I mean, it's amazing that Yeshua himself, in other words, it's like as wrong or as bad as you have done, I can fix it. Just come to me, and it's not like he took the most perfect people and just came all the way down, all the way up to his birth. It wasn't anything like that, so it's amazing. And I think it's like a lot of I don't know, like you guys, if you get on YouTube and you do all these, you listen to a lot of these different things, and it's amazing how the Muslims, how they just, Muhammad was this great, and I could see a lot of these Christian scholars debunking it, good, people need to hear this stuff about Muhammad. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
And just by way of mention, Genesis 49:10 is where our namesake comes from. So
Yep.
Shiloh comes. And Shiloh means to whom it belongs.
Yep.
And so that's why we named the congregation Shiloh, because we belong to the Lord.
And especially to find out that his imprint is right there.
In Hebrew, it's actually Shiloh.
Shiloh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not even Shiloh, it's Shiloh. But we don't, the Hebrew, the accent is often on the last syllable, but that doesn't work in English. So we go with Shiloh, not Shiloh. And if you're really an English speaker, it's Shiloh.
Yeah. Well, that's
So-
like David when he used to come and visit us.
Yeah.
He says all over our country, everybody says Shiloh. And he says, this is the only place he comes to. He says, where you pronounce the name of my city correctly. So, and we tell him, look, that's because it's our namesakes, But isn't it amazing how the Lord imprinted his name right there on the hillside
Yeah, the pictures
in
of
Shiloh?
the picture
Yeah. That is. It's right there. So in Revelation, well, here, let me give you a couple fill-ins. Roman numeral 3, letter C, Judah is compared to a lion. Compared is your fill-in. And then right below that, number 1, Yeshua, the Messiah, is from the tribe of Judah. In Revelation 5:5, the Lord is depicted as the lion of the tribe of Judah. The lion was the greatest of all the Egyptian animals. And I don't know if this is why Jacob references this to Judah. Judah, he tells Judah that, he compares them to a lion. Was it because they were in Egypt at the time of the blessing? Don't know, and then it goes on. And then to Zebulun, Jacob gave the sea and all of its trade. He proclaimed that it would be a great port, with its borders stretching as far as Zidon. Zidon, or it's here it's spelled like with a Z, or it could be spelled with an S. Zidon is in present-day Lebanon, right on the shore. Okay. Jacob then prophesies that Issachar would be like a strong donkey, crouched between two burdens, and that he would become a servant to the other tribes of Israel. Dan is Jacob foretold would be a judge to the other tribes. He compared him to a snake on the path that would attack riders as they pass. Dan, we do know that Dan, that his tribe expanded. Even up in Europe, you have the River Dan. So it is believed that they even went that far. Jacob promised that the tribe of Gad would become warriors. He declared that they would be overtaken for a time, and that they would eventually overcome. Okay, Jacob proclaimed that Asher would be rewarded with the best grain in all the land and become rich as a result of it. he promised that royalty would come from Asher's lineage. Okay, Naphtali, Jacob predicted, would be like a deer using beautiful words. Well, that's why I know that I am not from the tribe of Naphtali. I get tongue-tied. So, on the other hand, maybe my wife, Okay, to Joseph, he promised a fruitful lineage. He promised that while others would hate and try to destroy him, the tribe of Joseph would be made strong by the will of God. What I don't understand here is at this time of the blessing, I'm talking about Joseph's brothers, at this time, Joseph's brothers did not hate Joseph. It seems that now they were very grateful of him. So now, so when he gives the blessing to Joseph, let's see, we're in 49, he says, is fruitful. It says, archers bitterly attacked him and shot at him and harassed him, but his bow remained firm and his arms were agile. A lot of this blessing is because what I'm saying is because Jacob has already witnessed all this, and then he gives them a blessing. If this blessing had come 20 years earlier, and then all this happened, you would have, well, this fits Joseph to a T, but he gives this after everything had happened. But when we read about the blessings Jacob gave Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, their blessings were based upon the sins each of them had committed in the past. When we read about Joseph's past, we know that he had been bitterly attacked, yet he remained faithfully firm. That was the thing I was getting from Joseph. Even if this blessing came to him after the fact, with everything that was happening, it seems like Joseph did not waver. He always trusted in the Lord. The last blessing went to his youngest son, Benjamin. Jacob compared his youngest son to a ravenous wolf, saying that he would devour his prey in the morning and then split the reward amongst the other tribes in the evening. So I went to the Bible dictionary, and it tells us that the Benjamites were a warlike race, okay, and did a great service in resisting the Philistine oppression. Israel wanted a king, and then the thing is, with this, what I got was that being that they were warriors, they were great warriors. Okay. And Israel wanted a king, like all the other nations. We got to have a king. We got to be like all the other nations. They wouldn't accept that the Lord was their king. They needed a physical king right there with them. Okay, Israel wanted a king like all the nations around them. So Saul became their first king. And I don't think it was a coincidence that Saul was a Benjamite. Okay, he was a fierce warrior. Later, the Benjamites joined the northern tribes. But because, and that's what we were talking about earlier, maybe the 10 tribes when he was speaking about it, but because of their nearness to Jerusalem, it seems to have caused Benjamin gradually to become part of the tribe of Judah. And there's a lot who believe that because he was so close to Judah and Jerusalem that he might have just grafted into Judah. But there's one other famous Benjamite that I wanted to talk about, and that was the Apostle Paul. Romans 11:1 will tell you that he was a Benjamite. So in letter D, the tribe of Benjamin, warriors, King Saul and the Apostle Paul were from the tribe of Benjamin. I look at the Apostle Paul, and he must have been a rough person to get along with, to say the least. To say the least, But that was probably the most perfect person that the Lord picked. He needed somebody to be firm. He didn't need someone to. What's that?
He knew who he was.
He knew who he was. Yes. And Paul, he never walked with Yeshua. In fact, at first he hated him. So, but then he was used by the Lord. But you're right. Especially when Peter turned away from the Gentiles, and and it was Paul, this person that was grafted into the mix, so to speak, that stood up and said, no, like basically, Peter, what the heck are you doing?
That term petered out comes from?
Maybe that, I like that one, Kate. Kate gave us a nugget here, everyone. She said, is that where the term petered out came from?
You never figure out.
Yeah, right. Okay, after giving each of his sons their blessings, Jacob commanded his sons to transport his body to the burial place of his ancestors after his death. He told them that this place was in Canaan, in the field of Machpelah, on an area of land purchased from Ephron the Hittite. Following his instructions, Jacob laid down on his bed and died. Okay, and now we get to chapter 50. We are now at the end of the book of Genesis. The last chapter begins with Jacob. He has died, and Joseph is at his side weeping. Joseph had his physicians, it says, embalm Jacob. And we are told that the process took 40 days. But then did you read of that? And then on top of that, Egypt wept how many days? 70. They wept 70 days. So that's a long period of time to have already died, and you haven't even been transported yet, Joseph now goes before Pharaoh to ask for permission to leave Egypt to bury his father in Canaan. Joseph and his brothers bring the body from Egypt to be buried in the Machpelah cave in Hebron. On the way, they stop for a 7-day mourning period in Goran HaHatah. Your Bible may just have it as Atad. Okay, A-T-A-D. Goran HaHatah means threshing floor protected by briars. Okay, briars would be a thorny bush or hedge. Threshing floors would typically situated on the outskirts of a town or village, as noted. This is noted in the Mishnah. Okay, it talks pretty in depth about this. It doesn't say much in our Bibles. It is strange that Goran HaHatah is specified as being beyond the Jordan. In fact, where is it in the word there? It says beyond the Jordan. Okay, 50:10. It said, when they came to the threshing floor of Atah, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and sorrowful lamentation, and he observed 7 days of mourning for his father. I taught before that beyond the Jordan meant beyond the Jordan River, okay? Because how many Jordans do you know? The only one I knew is the Jordan River. I don't know if you could see it from, but here, that means if they were here in Egypt, they would have probably taken the road of the wilderness. The road of the wilderness would have taken them this way, and then they would have gone beyond the Jordan, then back over to get to Hebron. Does that make a lot of sense?
A long way.
That's a long way. Kate, use your,
Not the shortcut.
that's not the shortcut. Go ahead, Kate.
I thought it was interesting that when they took them from Egypt to be buried, it doesn't say right here how long it took them,
It doesn't say how long.
but it certainly took 40 years for the Israelites to get from Egypt to the promised.
Yeah,
There's a big reason for that.
there, yeah. And you're right. It doesn't say how long they took them. That's why there are many out there that believe that they did take the road of the wilderness road, and they did go beyond the Jordan, and then they came back. How long that would have taken? That would have taken a considerable amount of time. And I'm going to get onto this further, but go ahead first, Stefan. What do you have to say?
Is it me or Naphtali is not mentioned among the blessings?
No, he's mentioned. Naphtali is a doe let loose. He gives beautiful words. That's a huge blessing, right?
So where is it?
That would be in 21, Genesis 49:21.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, it's such a short blessing. Even
Right.
this one, it's just like bam, you're already across it. You know.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
No, you're fine. You're fine. But what I'm getting at here is I have since looked deeper into this and have found that they did not travel all the way to the Jordan River. And this is another understanding. And that's one thing great about this. When you start looking into it, you can just dive in there and you can go as deep as you want to go. If you just want to read what it says here and just say beyond the Yarden. In fact, that's what mine says. Mine says Yarden, Yardan. Okay, and right away you would think it's going to the Jordan River. Okay, first I would like to point out that Egypt was a mighty power at this time, the mightiest power in the world. Okay, their land mass would have been much larger than what you think of today. When you look at a map of Egypt, you look at a map of Egypt today and you got that little block there.
Right there.
Okay. Well, scholars say that Egypt at the time of Joseph would have included, if you can visualize a map of Africa, Sudan goes down to the south, okay, of Egypt. And then beyond that or there is Ethiopia. They say that all of present day Sudan and even as far as Ethiopia to the south would have been Egypt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Moses married a Cushite woman.
Cushite woman.
Ethiopia.
Yep, an Ethiopian. Okay. And did he leave to go to Ethiopia, another country, to marry her? No, he was still in Egypt. Okay. Now, if you go to the west, all of Libya would have been Egypt. At least the land along the Mediterranean Sea, that was all considered Egypt. And then if you go to the east, all of the Sinai Peninsula was considered Egypt. Now you understand when we get into the next Torah, when we get a couple Torah portions from now, we cover the Red Sea crossing. Then we'll talk about why we don't believe it's where most scholars believe they crossed, because it doesn't make any sense to leave one area, cross over, go into the Sinai Peninsula and say you'll never see them, like the Egyptians again when you're still in Egypt. So, but we'll cover that later. But then it says to the north, it didn't just stop like where the border is today. It went into part of what we call the land of Canaan. Part of that was also Egypt. You know, they always say that why couldn't, when they were taking, when Moses took the wilderness trail with all the people, how did Pharaoh know where they were at? Because they had little forts all along the way. Well, they had forts and they have found them all the way up to near Gaza of Egyptian fortresses, you know, especially along. I have a line here. I don't know if you can see it if you're zooming in, but there's a brown line here, the way of Horus. This is the Philistine way to get all the way up into Syria. Okay, it would continue on that way. So there are fortresses all this way. So if he would have went that way, Pharaoh would have known.
Yeah.
You know, but yet, then I'll get on. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Well, the forts go all the way up, and when we get into Exodus, we'll read they didn't take that route because there was Egyptian forts the whole way. They didn't want to have war. So, and even when we went to Israel, if you remember, Pastor Vince, we went to Beit Shan,
Yep.
which is right just below the Sea of Galilee. And Beit Shan, but if you ever go to Israel, it's got the best ruins of all Israel.
Roman.
But it was an Egyptian fort. We hiked up to the top of the plateau and actually found shards of Egyptian pottery
Right.
up there when we hiked up there.
Yep.
So that was all Egypt, and that goes all the way to the north of Israel.
Right. Yeah. No, it's amazing. But you know what we do is we think, well, Egypt, when they left Egypt, let me picture Egypt the way it is now. You know, we can't do that. It was much broader than that. So like I said, even Egypt went up into present day, parts of present day Israel. Okay, all this to say at the southern end of Canaan during Jacob's generation was a waterway called the Brook of Egypt. And I put it right here. This is the Brook of Egypt. Present day, the Brook of Egypt is in Israel. Okay, but this is the Brook of Egypt. And so let me go on now. This would have been the border between Canaan and Egypt. Just north of this waterway was a town of Gerar. Gerar, we have covered that many times in the Torah portions. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are all mentioned as living in Gerar. Not too far from this town of Gerar at the time was called a village called, you guessed it, Yarden. Okay, or Yarden. So when the Bible says in verse 10, which is beyond the Jordan or beyond the Yarden, they are not talking about the Jordan River, but a small village just beyond the Brook of Egypt. Pastor Vince, where did you find this? I'm glad you asked. Okay. We all know this from several writings. Josephus mentions as a point marking the southwestern corner of Judea, a village on the Arabian frontier, which the local Jews called Yarden. Okay. And still later reference to Yarden, whose importance there's importance about this because of the history of this village. It was found in a Syriac chronicle describing the Muslim victory over the Christians. And this happened on February 4th, 634 CE. The battle took place some 12 miles east of Gaza. So this battle took place east of Gaza, going this way. Okay, that's going east. And in this battle, the fleeing Christians, it says, left their wounded leader in Yarden, where he was killed together with some 4,000 Christians, Jews, and Samaritan villagers by the invading Arabs, who then went on to totally destroy this local settlement. As a result of this battle, the ancient village was obliterated. It was destroyed. So that's why we don't even hear about it today. So leaving Egypt and taking the short route north, which we always thought, leaving and taking the short route to Canaan would have made more sense. Why would they go all the way across and come the other way? And what it tells us is where they stop. Now, right here in green, I put that would be the route they would have gone to get to the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. And this would have been the way, because it says Yarden right next to Gerar, and they went all the way up to Hebron. And that makes more sense than going all the way around. And I don't know if you've ever been, we've been to Masada. Masada is over here on this side of the Dead Sea. And this is all mountain area. I mean, it's like you don't have a road that just goes right up. You have to go all the way around either way. Pastor Bruce.
In your studies, did you run across any indication that the Brook of Egypt might have been where the Suez Canal was started? Where
No, I didn't go
I
there.
just wonder if that is that area or not.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't do that. But like I said, so leaving Egypt and going to Canaan, this would have been the short way of to go, and that would have made more sense. Okay. So they went all the way up to the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. Some scholars do not accept this. They say the route was indeed all the way to the Jordan River. And their reasoning is going the short route, they would have encountered enemy armies. But like I said, we're talking about the greatest nation at that time, Egypt. There wasn't no enemy armies at that time. You know, they weren't there. And they also but as I said earlier, Egypt was a vast territory and had the greatest army of that time. It was there in Egypt. There was no one who could stand against Egypt at that time. The Canaanites were amazed that the Egyptians should come all the way to Canaan to bury someone who was obviously a very important person. And we read that in verse 10 to 14. Okay, when you're reading that. Now, when the inhabitants, in 11, it says, now when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, this is a grievous mourning for the Egyptian. Therefore, it was named Abal Mitzraim, which is beyond the Jordan. Thus, his son did for him as he had charged them. So his sons did exactly what his father wanted. But, that's why I thought, boy, last year, I think when I did this portion, if I did, or maybe the year before, I said, boy, they went all the way around. And I think I pinpointed some rabbis say that Garat Hatta is a small town right over here. And, they waited. And, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't, so it's whichever way you want. But I'll tell you, majority of the scholars believe that they did go beyond the Jordan River. Pastor Bruce.
Baal Mitzrayim means literally the meadow of Egypt.
The meadow of Egypt, yeah. And we're going to cover that too, because like I said, all the years that they spent in Egypt, Mitzrayim, it could be, the time of Isaac, but we'll get to that. So after Jacob was buried, we read that all his sons returned to Egypt. Now that was the other thing. He's buried. Why would they come? All of them come back to Egypt. They can now probably go their own separate ways, but they all come back to Egypt. They left their families in Egypt.
Yes, all the little ones.
All the little ones were in Egypt. I don't know about you, but You know,
Like-
I don't want to go to Egypt, but if my kids are there, I'm going to go back and I'm not going to leave them, you know. So Joseph's brothers were afraid that he might punish them for their actions against him. Therefore, they pleaded with him, claiming that Jacob had called for him to be forgiving. Joseph spoke to them kindly and forgave them for what they had done. He claimed that though they had acted wickedly concerning him, God had bent their actions for good. So,
That's where
you
the
know,
saying comes, that's where
that,
the rule comes.
yeah. So Joseph did not judge his brothers as his time in Egypt, you know, but he loved his brothers. He realized what they meant for evil, the Lord meant for good, you know, and that's why we always say that, you know, if we did it God's way, oh my gosh, it would be so wonderful. But we seem to, you know, Lord, get out of the way and let me do it my way. And then we just mess things up, you know. So after returning from Canaan, Joseph spent his entire life in Egypt. During his lifetime, he saw 3 new generations come from his sons. Before he died, Joseph spoke to his brothers, telling them that God would help them to leave Egypt. Following his death at 110 years old, Joseph was embalmed and laid in a coffin in Egypt. Lastly, 2 things to point out. Here, let me give you a couple. First, let me give you some fill-ins. In Roman numeral 4, Jacob dies and will be carried out of Egypt to Hebron. And in letter A, Egypt honored Jacob. They wept for 70 days after he died. And then in letter B, Yarden. Is it a small village or is it the Jordan River? You choose. I think I gave you a little convincing idea of what it might be. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can go one way or you can go the other. But I thought, boy, when I read with Josephus about this village in Yarden, or called Yarden, my gosh, and it's beyond the brook of Egypt, you know, it makes you think a little bit more about this. In letter C, all of Jacob's sons return to Egypt after he is buried. So lastly, 2 things to point out in the last paragraph in chapter 50. We see that Joseph had his brothers swear that Joseph's bones would be carried out of Egypt. The other point is Joseph also tells his brothers that they will be carried out of Egypt to Canaan. In verse 24, turn to verse 24. Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely take care of you and bring you up from this land to the land which he promised an oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Have any of you, I mean, we all know that Jacob's bones were carried out of Egypt. But have you ever thought about, well, what about the other brothers? Were their bones carried? Have you ever thought, I mean, how many of you thought their bones were carried out of Egypt? I never did. Well, I never did because I never read it. The only thing I've ever read was Joseph's bones would be carried out of Egypt. But here, Joseph tells his brothers that he's going to take care of them and bring you up from this land to the land which he promised. Was he just talking about the generations, or was he talking about their physical bodies? Their bones would also be carried out. I'm glad you asked. Well, what did you find out? Okay, you know, like I said, we know that Moses carried Joseph's bones out of Egypt. But what about the other 11 sons of Jacob There are those who believe only Joseph's bones were carried out. I found this, which is written in the Sefer HaHasher, which is with the midrash for the book of Asher. Okay, this is in the book of Asher. It says, and Joseph cut a covenant with the people on that day. On Joseph, did I say Joseph? Okay, I'm sorry. It says, and Joshua, big difference. Okay, in the book of Asher, it says, and Joshua cut a covenant with the people on that day. And he sent his children of Israel away, and they went each one to his inheritance and to his city. Who is the one that gave the land in Canaan to all the tribes? Who was the leader at that time? Joshua. Joshua is the one that, and it's amazing that they say when he did this, it's like it was like a not a lottery. I don't want to say that, but it's like they put their names in a hat. Said to this land, you're going to get this, and he pulled out the name, and it was exactly the tribe that should have been there. So everything he did it the way God designed it to be. So what we hear is he sent the children of Israel away, and they went each one to his inheritance and to his city. And then it goes on to say, and it came to pass in those days when the children of Israel dwelt securely in their city, that they buried the coffins of their fathers, of their tribes. It says in the book of Jasher. Okay, which they had brought up, and then it goes on to say, which they had brought up with them from Egypt. Every one of the 12 sons of Jacob, they was buried by the children of Israel in their inheritance of the land. And then it goes on to say, and these are the names of the cities wherein the 12 sons of Jacob were buried, whom the children of Israel had brought up from Egypt. And they buried, it goes on to say it like this, and they buried Reuben and Gad on this side of the Jordan, in Rumia, which Moses had given unto the children. And Simeon and Levi they buried in the city of Manda, which was given unto the children of Simeon, for which a certain part had been assigned for the sons of Levi. And Judah they buried in the city of Benjamin, opposite Bethlehem. And the bones of Asher and Zebulun they buried in Zidon, in the portion which had fallen to the lot of their children. And Dan was buried in the city of his children, the city of Ethanol. And Naphtali and Asher they buried in Kadesh Naphtali, each one in the place given unto his children. And the bones of Joseph they buried in Shechem, in the portion of the field which Jacob had bought from Hamor, and which became the inheritance of the children of Joseph. And Benjamin they buried in Jerusalem, opposite the Jebusite, which was given unto the children of Benjamin. Thus the children of Israel buried their ancestors, everyone in the city of his children. You'll find that in the book of Jasher. So
Jasher or Asher?
Jasher, it's a J.
Jasher. Okay.
Jasher.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, did you find out anything about Joseph is the next to youngest brother?
Yeah.
So did he die before his brothers?
He died.
Did you find anything out?
Yes. What I found out is Joseph was he died before his older brothers. He was the first one to die, and then his brothers lived on in Egypt. Okay. That
Interesting.
that is interesting. So with this, I thought, boy, there was a few things I brought up that I had never brought up before in this Torah portion. And it just makes us want to go back and say, like, oh my gosh, use your notes and go and see what you can find out. So in letter D, Joseph dies at 110 years old. And then the letter E, the bones of Jacob's sons would all leave Egypt during the Exodus years later. So leave and Exodus are your fill-ins. I've never thought, what was that, Kate?
I was wondering, did they have them in coffins? They carried them across the Red Sea in coffins?
Well, at this point in time, it would be their bones.
Okay.
And their bones, you can put the bones in.
Ossuaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. What the Jewish tradition was, you would dig up the body after a year of being buried, and then you would take the bones and put them in what's called an ossuary, which was a smaller little casket thing, and the bones would remain in that. And in fact, they found the ossuary of Yeshua just not too long ago. Or, I mean, not
James
Yeshua.
with a J.
James.
Yeah, James.
James. But what confused me is it was written under the brother of Yeshua.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they found that, maybe 5 years ago?
5 years ago, something like that.
Wow.
In Jerusalem.
There's a lot of historians that have, or archaeologists that have discounted that, but then some would say. But the thing is too, when they're buried and they pick them up and they put them in there, you got generations of their family's bones that are there.
Who gets that job?
I know it, huh?
I'm not familiar with this, so that's why I'm asking if you would know. Okay, if they embalmed him, what
Right.
happens if they embalm him? How do they just have bones? Doesn't the body, what happens with the body?
I thought the same. Yeah, I thought the same thing, because all these pharaohs that they have discovered, and they have a mummified body.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
right. Now Jacob, when they took him to Hebron and buried him, it was most likely a body.
But Joseph wasn't Joseph embalmed?
No, that's what I'm going to get at.
Oh,
Joseph was also embalmed.
yeah,
So why would it be bones?
bones, that's my question. Then.
Well,
I don't, because it's
Might not have been.
it,
The whole body.
to be embalmed is not the same as mummified.
mm,
No, but
Even in our society, every body is
it
embalmed.
still preserves.
It's preserved, and all that does is get you through the mourning season, basically. But
Right.
still the body deteriorates and turns to dust. You have to go through a special process to actually mummify the body. And of course that takes a long time to do that, and a very special procedure. So they weren't mummified, they were embalmed,
That's different.
which caused the body to last a little longer.
right. But but like Tila, I thought the same thing. I thought, okay, I could understand the bones being taken out, but if you did the same thing to Joseph that you would do to the pharaohs, wouldn't his body just be,
Yeah, that's.
but yet Moses is going to be taking his bones out of Egypt.
Even when they unwrap the mummies, they're still basically bones.
There's
not
you're right.
a lot left of them.
No.
Wait, I saw a movie about the mummy. So
I would watch it.
those are I've watched movies like that way back in the days, Yeah, not anymore, So all of Jacob's sons were buried in the land given to their tribes, and I thought that was interesting.
What was the
Okay.
reference on that, Josh?
That was Jasher. I didn't get the book. All I wrote down was Sefer HaYasher, and that's out of the Midrash, and then it's called the Book of Jasher, Jasher. Yeah. So So that was interesting. That's an interesting Torah study for this one.
Very good.
Very good.
Now, on the end of your we have reached the end of a Torah portion, and every time we reach the end of a Torah portion, we say, you have it in front of you, I don't have it in front of me, but it'll say, Hisak, be strong,
Be strong, be strong.
and may we be straight. Yeah, so if you're at home and you made a copy of it, go ahead and say it, and next week we'll start on a new Torah portion. Amen, yeah. And that's our Torah portion for today, everyone.
Very good.